The telegraph key clicked under Althea Dalton's fingers. Rhythm steady, heart anything but. She kept her eyes on the brass instrument, not on the man filling the doorway of the cramped office. Sheriff Jesse Thornton stood with his hat in hand, dust on his coat, jaw tight. The whole town had watched him ride in 10 minutes ago with a prisoner in irons, and now half of Silver Fork waited outside to see what the telegraph operator would say. Althea's pulse hammered. She finished the outgoing message, lifted her hand, and met his gaze. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had ridden 3 days without sleep and come back with the wrong answer. Jesse cleared his throat. The sound scraped the silence. "You sent the wire about the witness," he said. His voice carried the gravel of exhaustion. "I need to know if you received any reply." Althea's fingers curled against the counter edge. She had received a reply. She had burned it an hour ago in the stove behind her. The reply had named a man. The man Jesse had just brought in was not that man. She swallowed. "No reply yet," she said. Her voice came out steady, too steady. Jesse's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer. The floor creaked. "You sure about that, Miss Dalton?" She held his gaze. Lying to a lawman was a crime. Lying to this lawman felt like stepping off a cliff. But the truth would destroy her family. Unravel the forged land claim her father had signed 2 years before he died. And leave her mother and younger brother with nothing. Althea had spent 3 years building a reputation in Silver Fork as the most reliable telegraph operator in the territory. She had survived public humiliation once, when a drifter had accused her of sending false messages for profit, and the whole town had watched her defend herself in the street. She had clawed her way back to trust. She could not lose it again. "I am sure," she said. Jesse set his hat on the counter. He leaned in. The scent of horse and leather and alkali dust surrounded him. "Miss Dalton," he said quietly, "if you are protecting someone, you need to tell me now. I arrested Cal Brennan based on the description in your last wire. If he is not the fugitive, I just made a mistake in front of the whole territory." Althea's throat tightened. Cal Brennan was a drifter, a troublemaker, a man with a quick temper and a history of fights. But he was not the man the federal marshal had described. The real fugitive was still out there, and the real fugitive had been seen 2 days ago near the boundary of her family's ranch, the land her father had claimed with a forged signature on a surveyor's document. If Jesse started asking questions about why a wanted man had been near Silver Ranch, the whole lie would unravel. She straightened. "Sheriff, I sent every word exactly as it came through. If the marshal's description was incomplete, that is not my fault." Jesse exhaled through his nose. He picked up his hat. "You are right," he said. "But something does not sit right. Brennan denies everything, and the timing feels wrong." Althea said nothing. Jesse turned toward the door, then stopped. He looked back at her. The light from the window cut across his face, highlighting the scar along his jaw, the fatigue in his eyes. "If you hear anything at all, you bring it to me first. Not the mayor. Not the town council. Me. Understood?" She nodded. He left. The door swung shut. Althea sank onto the stool behind the counter and pressed her palms against her eyes. Outside, voices rose. She heard the mayor's sharp tone, the murmur of the crowd, the clatter of a wagon rolling past. Silver Fork was a town built on silver strikes and cattle drives, perched in a high valley where the wind never stopped, and trust was earned in blood. Althea had no family name to protect her here. Her father had been a dreamer, a man who had staked a claim on land he believed held silver, forged a boundary survey to secure it, and died 6 months later when his horse threw him during a storm. Her mother had sold the dream, but kept the land, leased it to a neighbor for grazing, and moved into town with Althea and her brother. The forgery had never been discovered, but if anyone looked closely, if anyone compared the survey her father had filed with the original county records, the lie would surface, and the real fugitive knew. He had been there the day her father signed the fake document. He had been the witness. Althea stood. She crossed to the stove, checked the ash, and stirred it with the poker, to be sure no scrap of the burned telegram remained. Then, she pulled her shawl tight and stepped outside. The street was full. A crowd had gathered in front of the sheriff's office, a low building with barred windows and a heavy door. Jesse stood on the steps, arms crossed, face unreadable. Cal Brennan sat inside, visible through the window, hands still in irons. The mayor, a round man in a brown suit, jabbed a finger toward Jesse. "You rode out for 3 days and brought back the wrong man," he said loudly. "The federal marshal is going to hear about this." Jesse did not flinch. "I brought back the man who matched the description sent through the telegraph," he said evenly. "If the description was wrong, that is not my failing." The mayor turned toward Althea. She froze. "Miss Dalton," he called. "You sent that wire, did you not?" Every head swiveled toward her. Althea's stomach dropped. She forced herself to walk forward, boots crunching on the dirt street. "I transmitted the message exactly as it came through," she said. "Word for word." The mayor's eyes narrowed. "And no follow-up? No correction?" She met his gaze. "None." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back said, "Maybe the marshal made a mistake." Someone else said, "Or maybe she did." Althea's jaw tightened. She had survived this once before. She would survive it again. Jesse stepped down from the porch. He moved between her and the mayor. "Miss Dalton's record is solid," he said. "If there is blame, it belongs to the federal marshal's office for sending incomplete information." The mayor scoffed. "Or it belongs to the operator who burned evidence." Silence dropped like a stone. Althea's breath stopped. Jesse turned slowly toward the mayor. "What did you say?" The mayor shrugged. "I am simply suggesting that if a telegram came through with a correction, and Miss Dalton decided not to share it, we would have no way of knowing. Unless someone checked her stove." Althea's vision narrowed. Jesse looked at her. She saw the question in his eyes. She saw the doubt. And she saw something else. Something that looked like disappointment. Her chest tightened. "I burned scrap paper this morning," she said. "Nothing more." The mayor smiled. "Then you will not mind if the sheriff takes a look." Jesse hesitated. Then he nodded once. Althea's heart slammed. She turned and walked back toward the telegraph office, the crowd following like a wave. Jesse walked beside her, silent. When they reached the door, she stepped inside and gestured toward the stove. "Be my guest," she said. Jesse knelt beside the stove. He opened the small iron door and peered inside. Ash. Nothing but ash. He stirred it with the poker, slow and deliberate. Althea watched from the counter, arms crossed, pulse hammering. The crowd pressed close to the doorway, watching. The mayor stood at the threshold, smug. Jesse sat back on his heels. He closed the stove door and stood. "Nothing," he said. The mayor's face darkened. "You barely looked." Jesse turned toward him. "I looked enough. There is no evidence of wrongdoing here. Now, unless you have actual proof, I suggest you let Miss Dalton get back to work." The mayor opened his mouth, then shut it. He turned and pushed through the crowd. The murmur faded. People drifted away. Jesse stayed. Althea uncrossed her arms. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jesse did not look at her. He picked up his hat and dusted it against his leg. "I did not do it for you," he said. "I did it because this town runs on gossip, and I will not let the mayor turn a telegraph operator into a scapegoat. Just because he is angry I brought in the wrong man." He settled the hat on his head. "But if I find out you lied to me, Miss Dalton, you and I are going to have a very different conversation." He walked out. The door swung shut. Althea stood alone in the empty office, shame and relief twisting together in her chest. That night, she lay awake in the small room she shared with her mother above the dry goods store. The wind rattled the window. She could hear her brother's soft snoring from the next room. Her mother slept beside her, breathing slow and even. Althea stared at the ceiling. She had lied to a lawman. She had burned evidence. She had put an innocent man in a cell and let the real fugitive walk free. And the worst part was, she would do it again. Because the alternative was losing everything. The ranch, her mother's security, her brother's future, her own reputation. She had clawed her way out of humiliation once. She could not go back. Morning came cold and bright. Althea dressed in the dark, braided her hair, wrapped her shawl tight, and walked down to the telegraph office. The street was quiet. A few early risers moved past, nodding. She unlocked the door, lit the lamp, and sat down at the counter. The key was silent. She waited. An hour passed. Then the key began to click. She copied the message, word by word. It was from the federal marshal. It was addressed to Sheriff Jesse Thornton. It said, "Witness located. Fugitive confirmed as Garrett Moss, not Cal Brennan. Release Brennan immediately. Apologies for error." New description follows. Althea's hands shook. She read the description. Garrett Moss. Tall, thin, dark beard, scar across his right hand. Last seen near Silver Fork 2 days ago. Near Silver Ranch. She sat back. Her pulse roared in her ears. She could send the message. She could walk it over to Jesse right now. She could clear Cal Brennan and let Jesse go after the real fugitive. But if Jesse started asking why Garrett Moss had been near Silver Ranch, if he started digging into her family's land claim, the forgery would surface. And Garrett Moss would talk. He had been her father's partner in the scheme. He knew everything. Althea closed her eyes. Then she folded the message, slipped it into her pocket, and walked out the door. She found Jesse at the livery stable, checking his horse's shoes. He looked up when she approached. His expression did not change. "Miss Dalton," he said. She stopped a few feet away. "I need to talk to you," she said. He straightened. "About what?" She hesitated, Then she said, "About a deal." His eyes narrowed. "What kind of deal?" She took a breath. "The whole town thinks you made a mistake arresting Brennan. They think I might have helped you make it. If we do not fix this, neither of us will have any credibility left." Jesse crossed his arms. "I am listening." Althea said, "What if we made it look like we were working together all along? What if we let people think we have been courting quietly, and that I have been helping you track the real fugitive in secret?" Jesse stared at her. "You want to fake a courtship?" She lifted her chin. "I want to protect both our reputations until the real fugitive is caught. Once he is in custody, the town will forget about Brennan, and we can go our separate ways." Jesse shook his head slowly. "That is the worst idea I have heard in a long time." Althea felt heat rise in her face. "Then enjoy being the sheriff who arrested the wrong man, and let the mayor destroy your career." She turned to leave. Jesse caught her arm. She stopped. He let go immediately, but his voice was low and urgent. "Why do you care so much about protecting me?" She met his eyes. "Because if you go down, I go down with you. And I have worked too hard to let that happen." He studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "If we do this, we do it my way. No lies to me. If you know something about this fugitive, you tell me." Althea's stomach twisted. She nodded. He exhaled. "All right. We start tonight. There is a town dance. We show up together. We let people see us. We let them talk. And tomorrow, I release Brennan and announce I am going after the real man." Althea swallowed. "Agreed." Jesse picked up his saddle. "You better be a good actress, Miss Dalton. Because if this falls apart, we are both finished." She watched him lead his horse out into the sunlight, and she wondered if she had just made everything worse. That evening, Althea stood in front of the cracked mirror in her room and adjusted her shawl. Her mother watched from the bed, hands folded. "You are going to a dance with the sheriff," she said. Her tone was carefully neutral. Althea nodded. Her mother said, "Is this wise?" Althea met her gaze in the mirror. "It is necessary." Her mother sighed. "Your father used to say that too, right before he did something reckless." Althea turned. "Mama, I know what I am doing." Her mother stood. She crossed to Althea and placed a hand on her cheek. "I hope so," she said softly. "Because if you are not careful, you are going to end up caring about that man. And caring makes everything harder." Althea walked down to the main street as the sun set. The dance was held in the largest building in town, a 2-story structure that served as meeting hall, courtroom, and social center. Lanterns hung from the eaves, casting warm light across the dusty yard. Music drifted out, fiddle and guitar. People gathered in clusters, talking, laughing. Althea saw Jesse waiting near the entrance. He wore a clean shirt, his jacket brushed, his hat in hand. He looked uncomfortable. She walked up to him. He looked at her. "You ready?" he asked. She nodded. He offered his arm. She took it. They walked inside together. The room fell silent. Every head turned. Then the whispers started. Jesse led her to the side of the room, away from the dancers. He released her arm. People stared. The mayor stood near the punch table, scowling. A group of women near the door whispered behind their hands. Althea felt her face heat. Jesse leaned close. "Smile," he said quietly, "like you are glad to be here." She forced a smile. He returned it, stiff and unconvincing. "This is a disaster," she murmured. He said, "Just stay close and let them think what they want." A man approached, one of the town council members. "Sheriff," he said. "Interesting choice of companion." Jesse's jaw tightened. "Miss Dalton has been assisting me with the investigation," he said evenly. "I thought it appropriate to thank her publicly." The man raised an eyebrow. "I see. And how exactly has she been assisting?" Althea spoke before Jesse could answer. "I have been coordinating communications with the Federal Marshal's office and tracking telegraph activity across the territory." The councilman looked skeptical. "That is very dutiful of you." Jesse said, "It is more than dutiful. It is essential. Without Miss Dalton's work, I would not have identified the error in the original description." The councilman glanced between them. "So, you are saying she helped you realize you arrested the wrong man?" Jesse met his gaze. "I am saying she is the reason I will catch the right one." The councilman nodded slowly and walked away. Althea exhaled. Jesse looked at her. "Not bad," he said. She said, "You are a decent liar when you need to be." He said, "I could say the same about you." The music started again. Couples moved onto the floor. Jesse hesitated, then offered his hand. "We should dance," he said, "or people will wonder why we came." Althea took his hand. They stepped onto the floor. He placed one hand at her waist. She rested her hand on his shoulder. They began to move, slow and cautious. Althea had not danced in 2 years, not since the scandal. Jesse moved like a man unaccustomed to this kind of closeness. They were both terrible at it. But they stayed in rhythm, and after a moment, Althea realized she could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. It was steady, strong. She looked up at him. He was watching her. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. He said, "Because I hate being wrong, and I hate being made a fool." She said, "That is not the whole reason." He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Because you defended me in front of the mayor. And no one has done that in a long time." She felt something shift in her chest. She said, "I only defended you because it served my purpose." He said, "I know. But I am choosing to believe it was more than that." They turned. The lantern light caught his face, the scar on his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes. She said, "What happened to you?" He said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You look like a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time." He smiled faintly. "I could say the same about you." She looked away. The song ended. They stepped apart. The room applauded politely. Jesse said, "That was not as bad as I expected." She said, "Low bar." He almost laughed. They stayed for another hour, standing together at the edge of the room, letting people see them, letting the gossip build. By the time they left, the whole town was talking. Jesse walked her home through the dark streets. The wind had picked up, cold and sharp. Althea pulled her shawl tight. Jesse walked beside her, hands in his pockets. When they reached the stairs leading up to her room, he stopped. "Tomorrow I release Brennan," he said. "And then I go after Moss." Althea's stomach dropped. How do you know his name? Jesse looked at her. The second telegram came through this afternoon. I picked it up from your office while you were getting ready for the dance. Her breath caught. You went into my office? He said. I am the sheriff. I have a right to check incoming messages related to an active investigation. Her hands clenched. What did it say? Jesse said. It said Garrett Moss was last seen near Silver Ranch. He paused. Your family's ranch. Althea's heart hammered. She forced herself to stay calm. So? Jesse said, so I am wondering why a federal fugitive would be anywhere near your land. She met his eyes. I have no idea. Maybe he was passing through. Maybe he was looking for work. Maybe it was a coincidence. Jesse stepped closer. I do not believe in coincidences. She lifted her chin. Then I guess you will have to keep wondering. He studied her. Then he said, if you are protecting him, you need to stop. He is dangerous. She said, I am not protecting him. Jesse said, then why do I get the feeling you are lying to me again? She turned and climbed the stairs without answering. Jesse called after her, Althea. She stopped at the top, hand on the door. He said, I meant what I said earlier. No lies between us. If you know something, tell me now. She looked down at him. His face was half in shadow. She said, Good night, Sheriff. Then she went inside and closed the door. She leaned against it, breathing hard. Her mother was asleep. Her brother's door was closed. Althea crossed to the window and looked out. Jesse still stood in the street, looking up. Then he turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the dark. The next morning, Jesse released Cal Brennan in front of the whole town. He stood on the steps of the sheriff's office and made a short announcement. New information had come through. Brennan was not the fugitive. The real man was Garrett Moss. Jesse would be riding out within the hour to track him. The crowd murmured. Brennan walked out, rubbing his wrists, glaring. The mayor demanded an explanation. Jesse gave none. He turned and went back inside. Althea watched from across the street, hidden in the shadow of the telegraph office doorway. She saw Jesse gather supplies, check his rifle, saddle his horse, and she knew she had to make a choice. She could let him ride out, let him find Moss, let Moss talk, let the forgery come to light, let her family lose everything. Or she could go with him. She could try to find Moss first. She could try to silence him before Jesse got there. It was a terrible plan. It was probably impossible. But it was the only plan she had. She went back inside, wrote a quick note to her mother, grabbed her coat and her father's old revolver from the locked drawer under the counter, and walked out the back door. She circled around to the livery, rented a horse, and rode out of town before anyone noticed. She knew where Moss would be. There was an old line shack on the northern edge of Silver Ranch land, a place her father had used during winter roundups. It was remote, hidden in a stand of cottonwoods near a dry creek. If Moss was still in the area, he would be there. She rode hard, the wind cold against her face, the sky wide and empty overhead. It took 2 hours. When she reached the shack, she dismounted and tied her horse out of sight. She pulled the revolver from her coat pocket, checked the chambers, and approached on foot. The shack was silent. Smoke rose from the chimney. She crept to the window and peered inside. Garrett Moss sat at a rough table, eating beans from a tin plate. He was alone. Althea took a breath. Then she kicked the door open and leveled the revolver. Moss jerked to his feet, knocking the plate to the floor. His hand went to his belt, but Althea said, "Do not." He froze. She stepped inside, keeping the gun steady. "Hello, Garrett," she said. His eyes narrowed. "Althea Dalton," he said slowly. "I heard you were making a name for yourself in Silver Fork," she said. "Sit down," he said. She closed the door with her boot. Moss leaned back in the chair, studying her. "You here to shoot me?" she said. "That depends." He smiled. "On what?" she said. "On whether you plan to keep your mouth shut about my father's land claim." His smile widened. "So you know I am wanted. And you know the sheriff is coming for me. And you know, if I get arrested, I will tell him everything." She tightened her grip on the revolver. "Yes," Moss said. "Then you should shoot me right now, because I have got no reason to protect you." Althea said, "I will pay you." He laughed. "With what?" "You have got nothing. Your father died broke. Your mother is scraping by. You work a telegraph key for pennies." She said, "I will find a way." He shook his head. "No, you will not. But I will make you a deal. You help me get out of this territory, and I will keep quiet," she said. "How am I supposed to do that?" he said. "You are the telegraph operator. You send a message saying I was spotted 2 counties over. You send Jesse Thornton chasing shadows. By the time he figures it out, I will be long gone," she said. "And if I refuse?" He leaned forward. "Then I tell the sheriff everything. About the forged survey. About your father paying me to witness it. About the fact that you have known all along and said nothing." Althea's hand shook. She forced it steady. "I could just shoot you," she said. Moss said, "You could, but you will not. Because you are not a killer, and because the sound of that shot will bring the sheriff running, and you will have to explain why you are here." She hated that he was right. She lowered the gun slightly. Moss stood. He took a step toward her. She raised the gun again. "Stop." He stopped. But his expression had changed. He looked almost sympathetic. "Althea," he said quietly, "your father was a fool. But he was not a bad man. He just wanted to leave you something. I understand that. I am not trying to destroy you. I am just trying to survive," she said, "by blackmailing me." He shrugged. "Call it what you want, but we both know you do not have a choice." Before she could answer, the door burst open. Jesse Thornton stepped inside, rifle leveled. Moss spun toward him. Althea stumbled back. Jesse's eyes flicked to her, then to Moss. "Nobody move," Jesse said. Moss raised his hands slowly. Althea lowered the revolver, her heart slamming. Jesse kept the rifle trained on Moss. "Miss Dalton," he said without looking at her. "Step outside." She did not move. "Jesse," she said. He cut her off. "Outside. Now." She swallowed and walked past him, out into the cold air. She heard Jesse say, "Garrett Moss, you are under arrest." She heard the click of irons. She stood beside her horse, shaking, and waited. Jesse brought Moss outside a few minutes later, hands cuffed. He looked at Althea. Her face was pale. Jesse said, "We are riding back to town. You are coming with us." She nodded. They mounted and rode in silence, Moss between them. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and sage. After an hour, Jesse said, "How long have you known where he was?" Althea did not answer. Jesse said, "You rode out here to find him before I did. You had a gun. You were going to do something stupid." She said, "I was going to make him leave." Jesse glanced at Moss. And he was going to agree to that, out of the goodness of his heart? Moss said nothing. Althea said, "It does not matter now." Jesse said, "It matters to me." They reached Silver Fork at dusk. The streets were crowded. People stopped and stared. Jesse rode straight to the sheriff's office, dismounted, and hauled Moss inside. Althea stayed on her horse, uncertain. Jesse came back out. He looked up at her. "You and I need to talk," he said. She dismounted. He gestured toward the office. She followed him inside. Moss sat in the cell, silent. Jesse closed the door to the back room and faced her. "Start talking," he said. She met his eyes. "What do you want me to say?" He said, "I want you to tell me the truth. Why was Moss on your family's land? Why did you go after him alone? And why do I get the feeling this has nothing to do with catching a fugitive?" Althea's throat tightened. She could lie again. She could keep the secret buried. But she was so tired. And Jesse was looking at her like he actually wanted to believe her. She took a breath. "My father forged a land survey," she said. Moss was the witness. If Moss talks, my family loses the ranch, and I lose everything I have built here. Jesse stared at her. "How long have you known?" she said. "Since the first telegram. The one I burned." Jesse exhaled slowly. He sat down on the edge of the desk. "So you lied to me. You destroyed evidence. You let me arrest the wrong man. And you did it all to protect a forgery." She said, "I did it to protect my family." He said, "That does not make it right." She felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them back. "I know," she said. Jesse rubbed his face with both hands. Then he looked up. "Does your mother know?" Althea shook her head. "My father did it before he died." She never asked questions. Jesse said, "And your brother?" She said, "He was 10. He knows nothing." Jesse stood. He paced the small room. Then he stopped. "If I let this go, I am complicit. If I report it, your family is ruined, and you will probably face charges for obstruction," Althea said. "I know." He looked at her. "Why did you come here today? Why did you go after Moss yourself?" She said, "Because I could not let you find him first. I thought if I could make him leave, the secret would stay buried." Jesse said. "And now?" She said, "Now I do not know." Jesse crossed to her. He stood close. She could see the exhaustion in his face, the conflict. He said, "I should arrest you." She said, "I know," he said, "but I am not going to." She looked up, startled. "Why not?" he said. "Because I have spent the last 2 years trying to be the kind of lawman this town deserves. And the truth is, most of the people here have done something they are not proud of. Most of them have a secret. If I started arresting people for protecting their families, I would have no one left, she said. That does not make it legal, he said. No. But it makes it human. And I am choosing to see you as human, not just a suspect. She felt something break inside her chest. She said, I do not deserve that, he said. Maybe not, but I am giving it to you anyway, because I think you have been punishing yourself long enough. She looked down. A tear slipped free. She wiped it away quickly. Jesse said, Here is what we are going to do. I am taking Moss to the federal marshal in the morning. I am going to tell them he tried to extort you and you defended yourself. I am going to leave the land claim out of it. And you are going to stay here and keep running the telegraph office like none of this happened, she said. What if Moss talks? Jesse said. He will not. Because I am going to make him a deal. He keeps quiet about your family, and I will tell the marshal he cooperated. If he talks, I will make sure every charge sticks and he spends the rest of his life in prison. Althea looked up. Why would you do that for me? Jesse said, Because you stood beside me when no one else did. Because you defended me even when it cost you. And because I think you are worth saving. She could not speak. Jesse reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His hand was rough and warm. He said, You are not your father's mistakes, Althea. You are what you choose to do next. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, he was still there, watching her. She said, What if I choose wrong again? He said, Then I will be here to help you fix it. She believed him. For the first time in 3 years, she believed someone. They stood like that for a long moment. Then Jesse stepped back. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow is going to be hard. She nodded. She left the office and walked home through the dark streets. Her mother was waiting. Althea told her everything. Her mother cried. Then she held Althea and said, Your father would be so ashamed. And so proud. Althea did not understand. Her mother said, Ashamed of what he did. Proud of who you became anyway. Althea slept that night for the first time in weeks, deep and dreamless. Jesse left at dawn with Moss in irons. The town gathered to watch. The mayor tried to make a speech. Jesse ignored him. He rode out without looking back. Althea stood on the steps of the telegraph office and watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she went inside and got to work. The key clicked. Messages came and went. The day passed. Then another. And another. A week went by. No word from Jesse. The town grew restless. Rumors started. Some said Jesse had let Moss go. Some said Jesse had been killed. Althea ignored them. She kept working. She kept waiting. On the 8th day, a telegram came through. It was from the federal marshal's office. It said, Garrett Moss delivered. Charges confirmed. Sheriff Thornton commended. Althea read it 3 times. Then she walked over to the mayor's office and handed it to him. He read it. His face went sour. He said, I suppose the sheriff got lucky. Althea said, No. He got it right. She turned and walked out. That night, she stood at her window and watched the road. The next morning, Jesse rode into town. The crowd gathered. He dismounted, dusty and tired. He saw Althea standing across the street. He smiled. It was small and tired. and real. She smiled back. He walked over to her. The crowd watched. He said, "I need to send a telegram." She said, "Come inside." They went into the office. She closed the door. He set his hat on the counter. She said, "You did it." He said, "We did it." She shook her head. "You could have turned me in. You could have let Moss talk. You could have ended this a dozen different ways." He said, "I chose the way that kept you safe." She said, "Why?" He looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "Because somewhere between that dance and that line shack, I started caring about you. And I do not care about people easily." Althea felt her breath catch. She said, "I lied to you. I burned evidence. I put you in an impossible position." He said, "You also stood beside me when no one else would. You trusted me enough to tell me the truth when it mattered. And you were willing to face Moss alone to protect your family. That takes courage," she said, "or stupidity." He smiled. "Maybe both." She smiled back. He said, "I am not good at this, at talking about feelings, at letting people in. But I am trying, and I would like to try with you, if you will let me." She said, "What are you saying?" He said, "I am saying I want this to be real. Not a fake courtship. Not a deal. Just us. If you want that too." She crossed to him. She took his hand. It was rough and warm and steady. She said, "I want that." He exhaled, relief playing on his face. Then he pulled her close and kissed her. It was not graceful. It was not smooth. But it was real. And when they broke apart, Althea felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Jesse said, "The whole town is going to talk." She said, "Let them." He grinned. "You are trouble, Miss Dalton," she said. "And you are stubborn, Sheriff Thornton." He said, "Good thing we balance each other out." She laughed. It felt strange and wonderful. The weeks that followed were not easy. The mayor continued to grumble. A few townspeople whispered about the speed of their courtship. But most people saw what was plain. Two people who had been alone for too long, finding something worth holding on to. Jesse spent his evenings at the telegraph office, sitting in the corner while Althea worked, reading old newspapers or cleaning his rifle. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence. Althea's mother approved. Her brother thought Jesse was the toughest man in the territory. And slowly, Althea began to believe she might actually deserve this. 3 months later, the land dispute resurfaced. A surveyor arrived in town, hired by a neighboring rancher who wanted to challenge the Silver Ranch boundaries. Althea's stomach dropped when she heard. She went to Jesse. He listened. Then he said, "We are going to handle this the right way." Together, they rode out to the county office, 2 days' travel. They brought the original documents, the forged survey, and a written confession Althea had prepared. They met with the county clerk, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes. Jesse explained the situation. The clerk read everything. Then she said, "This forgery is nearly 4 years old. The man who witnessed it is in federal custody. The original claim was filed in good faith by a man who is now dead. And the land has been improved and maintained by his family ever since." She looked at Althea. "You understand that by confessing this, You are opening yourself to penalties. Althea nodded. I understand. The clerk said, however, given the circumstances and the time elapsed, I am inclined to issue a corrected survey and allow the family to refile under a homestead claim, provided they meet the residency and improvement requirements, which, based on these records, they do. Althea stared. You mean we can keep the land? The clerk said. With the proper filing, yes. It will cost a fee, and you will need to submit an affidavit, but the claim will be legal. Althea felt tears of relief. Jesse squeezed her hand. The clerk said, And Miss Dalton, do not make me regret this. Althea said, You will not. I promise. They rode back to Silver Fork and filed the paperwork. The new claim was approved. The ranch was safe. Althea's mother cried with relief. Her brother whooped and ran circles around the yard. And Althea stood in the middle of it all, feeling like she could finally breathe. Jesse stood beside her. He said, You did it. She said, We did it. He said, I am proud of you. She looked up at him. Thank you, she said, for believing I was worth saving. He said, You saved yourself. I just gave you room to do it. She kissed him, right there in the yard, in front of her family. Her mother smiled. Her brother made a face. Jesse laughed. That summer, the town council called a meeting. The topic was the sheriff's performance. The mayor stood and listed complaints. Jesse sat quietly and let him talk. When the mayor finished, Althea stood. She was not on the council. She had no official voice. But she spoke anyway. She said, Sheriff Thornton has served this town with integrity and courage. He admitted a mistake, corrected it, and brought in a federal fugitive when no one else could. If you want to remove him, you will have to explain to the rest of us why competence and honesty are grounds for dismissal. The room went silent. Then one councilman stood and said, I move we end this discussion and commend the sheriff for his work. The motion passed. The mayor sat down, fuming. Jesse caught Althea's eye and mouthed, Thank you. She smiled. That fall, Jesse asked Althea to marry him. He did it in the telegraph office, late at night, after she had closed up. He got down on one knee, awkward and earnest, and said, I do not have much to offer. Just a job that does not pay well, a reputation I am still rebuilding, and a stubborn heart that only seems to work when you are around. But if you will have me, I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. Althea pulled him to his feet. She said yes. He kissed her. The telegraph key clicked in the background, some distant message coming through. She ignored it. For once, the world could wait. They married in the spring, in the same meeting hall where they had danced that first awkward dance. The whole town came, even the mayor, though he did not smile. Althea wore a simple dress, cream-colored with lace at the collar. Jesse wore a clean shirt and his best jacket. Her mother cried. Her brother stood up as a witness, trying to look serious. The preacher spoke about love and trust and second chances. When Jesse kissed Althea, the room erupted in applause. Afterward, there was music and dancing and food. Althea danced with Jesse, and this time, they were better at it. Not perfect, but better. He said, No regrets? She said, None, he said. Good. Because you are stuck with me now. she said. I can think of worse fates. They moved into a small house at the edge of town, close enough to the sheriff's office and the telegraph office that they could both walk to work. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was theirs. Althea kept working the telegraph. Jesse kept enforcing the law. And in the evenings, they sat together on the porch and watched the sun set over the valley. Sometimes they talked about the future. Sometimes they talked about the past. And sometimes they just sat in silence, content. One night, Jesse said, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not walked into that line shack when I did?" Althea said, "Every day." He said, "What do you think would have happened?" She said, "I think I would have made a terrible mistake, and I think I would have spent the rest of my life regretting it." He said, "I am glad I stopped you." She said, "So am I." A year later, the federal marshal sent a letter. Garrett Moss had been tried, convicted, and sentenced to 15 years. The letter thanked Jesse for his work and noted that Moss had not mentioned anything about land claims or forgeries during his testimony. Jesse showed the letter to Althea. She read it twice. Then she folded it and put it in the drawer. That chapter was over. Jesse said, "How does it feel?" She said, "Like I can finally stop looking over my shoulder." He said, "Good, because I want you looking forward. At us, at what we are building." She kissed him. "I am," she said. "I promise." He said, "I love you." She said, "I love you too." And she meant it, wholly and without reservation. The seasons turned. Winter came hard, snow piling in the streets, wind howling through the valley. Althea and Jesse kept the stove burning and the house warm. Spring brought mud and rain, and the first green shoots pushing through the cold ground. Summer was hot and long, the kind of heat that made work slow and evenings precious. And fall came again, cool and clear, the aspens turning gold on the hills. Through it all, they built a life, small and steady and real. They had arguments. They had hard days. But they also had laughter and quiet mornings, and the kind of trust that only comes from choosing each other, over and over, even when it would be easier not to. One evening, Althea stood at the telegraph key, finishing the day's last messages. Jesse came in, dusty from a long ride. He leaned against the counter and watched her work. When she finished, she looked up. "Long day?" she asked. He nodded. "Yours?" she said. "Same." He said, "Want to go home?" She said, "Always." They walked together through the quiet streets, past the saloon where music drifted out, past the general store with its windows dark, past the church with its simple wooden cross. The stars were bright overhead, the air cool and clean. Jesse said, "You know what I like about this town?" She said. "What?" He said, "It gave me you." She smiled. "That is a good reason." He said, "Best reason." She took his hand. They walked the rest of the way in silence, comfortable and complete. 2 years after their wedding, Althea received a letter from the county clerk. It was short and formal. It said that the Silver Ranch homestead claim had been finalized and recorded. The land was legally and permanently theirs. Althea read the letter to her mother. Her mother wept. She said, "Your father would have been so relieved." Althea said, "I wish he were here to see it." Her mother said, "He is." In you. In the way you fought for this. In the way you made it right. Althea folded the letter carefully and put it in the box where she kept important things. Then she went to find Jesse. He was at the sheriff's office, writing a report. She told him the news. He stood and pulled her into his arms. "We did it," he said. She said, "We did." He said, "What do you want to do now?" She said. "Live. Just live." He said, "I can do that." And they did. The years passed. Althea became known as the best telegraph operator in the territory. Reliable and precise. Jesse became known as a fair lawman, tough but just. They bought a small piece of land next to Silver Ranch and built a larger house, one with room for the family they hoped to have. Althea's mother moved in with them. Her brother married and took over the main ranch. The town grew. New buildings went up. The railroad reached Silver Fork. Change came, as it always does. But some things stayed the same. Althea and Jesse stayed. They stayed in the town that had tested them. They stayed with each other. And they stayed true to the promise they had made that night in the telegraph office, to spend the rest of their lives making sure they never regretted choosing each other. One evening, many years later, they sat on the porch of their house and watched the sun set. Althea's hair had threads of silver now. Jesse's face had more lines. But their hands were still steady, still intertwined. He said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had not met?" She said, "No, because we did meet. And everything that came after, good and hard, was ours." He said, "I would choose it all again." She said, "So would I." He kissed her temple. She leaned into him. The wind moved through the valley, carrying the scent of sage and earth and home. And in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The stars came out one by one. The town settled into evening quiet. Somewhere, a dog barked. Somewhere, a door closed. Somewhere, life went on. But here, on this porch, in this moment, Althea and Jesse had everything they needed. They had fought for it. They had earned it. And they had built it together, one honest choice at a time. The wind picked up, cool and steady. Althea pulled her shawl closer. Jesse's arm came around her. She said, "Thank you." He said, "For what?" She said, "For seeing me as capable, for believing I was worth saving, for staying." He said, "Thank you for letting me." They sat together as the last light faded and the first stars grew bright. And when they finally went inside, they went together, as they always had, as they always would. The door closed softly behind them. The house was warm, and the story, their story, was complete.